Hey, everybody, we're back with the anchor of the Daily Report with John Dickerson. John Dickerson. John Dickerson, what do you make of Nancy Pelosi's carefully stated evasiveness? He said loading the question.
Yes. Well, it's a couple of things come to mind. The first is in John Boehner, former Speaker of the House's book about his time as Speaker. He said no one was tougher than Nancy Pelosi. He describes one instance in which she took on the veteran Democratic Congressman John Dingell, and Boehner says that, Dingell's entrails were left on the floor. That gruesome image as a way of saying she was tougher than I was, Boehner was saying. So Nancy Pelosi knows what she's doing. I interviewed Susan Page, who's Pelosi's biographer, twice after these two comments. The first being, is it an episode or a condition? And the second one, when, she said, well, the door's open. And Biden said, no, this door's closed. Well, the door's open. She doesn't, Susan Page, who knows her very well, said she doesn't do that stuff by accident. This is an attempt to get Biden to either get him to yes, or at least get him to reconsider, given what she's hearing from members and what her fears about his ability not only to beat Donald Trump, but all the down ballot races, all the Democrats in the Senate and the House who have races, and the ability of the party to win in those races.
Okay, so that's the present condition of things, or our lack of knowledge of what the condition is right now. As I said before, one of the things I love about talking to you is that you've done a lot of study and a lot of writing on not only the presidency itself, with your book, The Hardest Job in the World, but also the history of political campaigns with your Whistle Stop podcast and your Whistle Stop book. Is there any historical precedent for where we are now?
Not a clean one. But I was looking back at 1948, because 1948, the Truman race, is sort of every struggling campaign's hope in life, because everybody thought Truman was doomed. And when they went to the convention in 1948, the Democratic convention, there was a sign that said, we're just mild about Harry. Can you imagine going to your own convention? Delegates from the South and I think the Northeast went to Ike a week before the convention and said, please run. We don't want Truman. So and the AP reported that the delegates went to the 48 Democratic convention like they were going to a funeral. So I think if this doesn't get resolved, you have some very strong feelings from members of Congress about the threat from Donald Trump to democracy, and that Biden is not the only hope, but is an impediment to that. Mm-hmm. And so I think there will be that same kind of sadness. But Truman went on a 3,000-mile train ride around the country, hustling and beating up on Republicans and doing sort of feats of political strength, which is different than what Biden is doing. And there was also a union vote that he could grab that was more powerful than it is today. There were a lot of differences between those races. So while the similarity in terms of the tepidness is the same, the victory path is not replicable, I don't think.
Okay, if political positions are so entrenched right now, there's a lot of, people often say, there's very few people actually matter anymore because Republicans are Republicans and Democrats are Democrats, and even independents really aren't. Mm-hmm. There's just a very few people. How much does it matter who's at the top of the ticket, or are people just voting, red shirt versus blue shirt?
A lot of them aren't, and some people see that in this post-debate polling. So, for example, the Washington Post has a poll that has the number of people who think Biden shouldn't run in the high 70s, 80s, huge number. But in the head-to-head, they're tied, Biden and Trump. So people have all kinds of feelings. The question is their allegiance to party stronger than whatever feelings they may have? And there are certainly some of those members of the Republican Party who think Donald Trump was incited January 6th, believe he is a convicted felon for good reason, and are still voting for him. It's not a huge number, but it is so. To your point, that all validates that. However, two things mitigate against this. First of all, if there are 7 battleground states that have been very, very close, yes, there are lots of people voting for red shirt, blue shirt, but then there are some people still sloshing around who are still gettable and might go one way or the other. They're either double haters, people who hate both Biden and Trump, and at the end are just going to pick one of them. There are people who maybe haven't voted before, and because the margins are so small, you can pick up those people, and that leads to your victory. So candidates do matter. And also, if you look in the Senate races, remember Herschel Walker, Mehmet Oz, Baldock in New Hampshire, Blake Masters in Arizona. All of them lost bad candidates in the Senate races. If you look at so in other words, candidates do matter, even though those are places where Republicans might win. If you look at Democrats in the Senate who are running this cycle, they're polling all ahead of Biden, which means voters are having a different, they're saying, we don't like the president, even though he's a Democrat, but we like these Democrats. So there's independent thinking from voters that's distinct just from party.
We're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back with more John Dickerson, everybody.